Thanks for the coffee, by the way. That was really nice of you.
Can we start, please?
Welcome to Magic the Flavouring, the Magic the Gathering podcast. Let me take this again.
I hate you so much.
Welcome to Magic the Flavouring, the Magic the Gathering podcast, where we talk about all things magic, flavour design, and lore. I'm your host, Andy Mann.
Good morning. This is Nathan Cancel,
and we are talking Outlaws of Thunder Junction story episode.
Yeah.
Do you like Western World?
Pew pew.
Do you like Magic the Gathering? Do you like all of your favourite characters? And by that, I mean literally all of them in this set. Get it down your fucking throat. You're gonna love it. It's all of them. It's like playing Commander, but in a story. Do you love it?
Also, don't choke on the hats on the way down.
I fucking you will like it. I am Hasbro, and I will tell you what you will consume.
Yeah, if you weren't... do you know what actually kind of annoys me?
Go on, yeah, top of the episode.
Very quickly, is that they gave us team-ups for Aftermath with all the heroes teaming up. I mean, I guess some of them were also questionable bad guys, right? But we didn't get villain team-ups.
No. We had Thalia and the Git Roll,
yeah, I feel like also in the villain set, we should have had, I know that they had plots, but we'll probably get... This will be something we'll talk about in the main set properly, but, we didn't get, a villain's plan, going, I've done this to you ragtag bunch of ruffians.
Well, no, we didn't get a villain's plan. However, I feel like they've saved that idea for the epilogue. We will get on to it.
Okay. No, I didn't mean from a story point of view. I just meant from the cards point of view. Anyway, we'll talk about that when we do our flavour picks. We're not doing flavour picks today. We are doing the story.
Whoop, whoop, whoop.
6 episodes. There were 4 side stories. We're not going to follow any of those. They followed Yuma. They followed Annie. There's like a kind of a side story separate from the main story.
Annie Flash.
Yeah, where she gets and she does flash in the story. There's a bit of a sexy scene, which is not a normal Watsy thing to do. Then there was also
Geezer and
Jareth. They had another little side story, and it's not just them writing towards each other. Again, we'll get to that when we get to the main story. There's literally a bit where they go, so you guys are going to go and get this thing, and then the next paragraph goes, so they came back looking haggard, and then we're like, oh, I wonder if we're going to get that story, and we actually got that story in a side story.
I like it when they do things like that. That's a good one.
And then what was the 4th side story? Off the top of my head, I can't remember. I'm sure I read all of them. Oh, and The Long Way From Home, the one with Nashi and Abika. And that's for me. That was my favourite out of the 4 of them.
I like the concept of Abika. I just don't like Nashi.
Really?
No, never did.
He's still a bit of a whine. I'm doing it for my mum.
Yeah.
And I'm as someone who has a single mum, I get it. It's cute and everything, but grow up. Put the scroll down. Go to therapy, mate.
I love that. That is one of my favourite insults of all time. Grow up. Followed closely by stop showing off.
So people get past the 3rd sneeze, and I'm like, all right, I'm not blessing you anymore. This isn't all about you. Calm down.
Love it. No, we're going to talk about the main 6 story episodes, and then in kind of an epilogue to this episode, we will be talking about the epilogue episodes also, two of which we've got. Kemi Dawn Bowman wrote the main 6, and they also were previously in Magic doing a lot of the Kamigawa stories.
The Neon Dynasty.
Love that. Great writer. I think throughout our discussion of this, we'll probably discuss how actually they did quite a lot with not very much. One of those writers I don't feel jarring when I'm reading, even if they are good. Sometimes writers I kind of feel like it doesn't feel like a Magic story, and Kemi Dawn Bowman's not one of them. And they also, isn't it funny how they've done 2 story arcs set in planes which are more akin to our own world?
True. I guess, I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah.
I mean, I stand by there's a thing that I found with her writing is that I kept, because I did behind the curtain, I did the write up for this week, and there were several times where I'm trying to abridge a certain bit and do a cliff note for it, and I just get lost and I just start reading. I go back, I'm I don't know how to turn that into a random single line, because there's a lot of really nice... I don't really go into it properly at all here, but there's lots of really nice dialogue between characters. Her characterization is very, very good. And there's lots of internal monologue versus what people are actually saying. There's lots of tender moments. Yeah. And I haven't captured a lot of that in this overview, despite writing seemingly infinite amounts of text. But if you've only dipped and you've only kind of done shallowly, just to go through and kind of catch what's going on, reread, go into depth, because I do think that some of the characterization here is fantastic. And for how many characters they've tried to speak through, and also talking, through the final arc of Kellen, he actually comes across as a fairly 3D character this time. So I think she's done a bang up job. Again, it's really hard when you've got these really big casts to always guarantee that it's going to carry. And I think we've kind of got very lucky that they seem to keep getting writers that know how to handle a complex cast. Even if some people obviously get much more screen time than others, but I mean, there were definitely certain scenes where I always felt like, I'm here too, here's my line. And there were certain characters that you keep forgetting were actually in the story, but we'll get to that as we go through as well. Anything to add, Andy, quickly before I start and barrel straight into it?
Nah.
Cool, good, fantastic. Chapter 1, An Offer of Revenge. We start on a cold open of sorts, a short scene where a courier named Archie Dixon is hired by the Sterling Company to transport something valuable across Thunder Junction. He is intercepted by our actual villain of the set, Akul, head of the Hellspurs, Outlaw Collective, and just your typical average sentient dragon scorpion, you know, who's seeking whatever it is that the Sterling Company hired Dixon to carry. It turns out that the transport was a decoy, thanks traffic, and Akul, was a decoy, and the thing that Akul actually wants, his true prize, a key, is all we hear about it, moves elsewhere across Thunder Junction. He has missed his prize. Roll opening credits. I kind of imagine this is the point of where, like, you know, the credits for Thunder Junction come up, and that was just your cold open. Exactly, right?
Bang, bang, Thunder Junction.
So don't sit on Archie Dixon. He's dead. He's gone. So we now follow Ali Flash, a much more likely protagonist, an Atlin from a plane yet visited. After running with Akul as part of the Free Striders, she now lives a more homely lifestyle away from outlawing in Saddlebrush. She is accosted by Oko, looking to put together a team to perform a great heist, Ocean's 11 style. Annie has a magical eye, gifted by an angel that sees through all enchantments and illusions, suggesting that the unfinished business with Akul that she has been kind of avoiding can be put to bed. And also there's a handsome reward for her participation. Oko not so subtly hints that if he can find her at Saddlebrush, who else could come looking? And he leaves with Annie not able to help feeling like her past has caught up with her. We cut to Kellen. Yep, this guy again. But for real, but for real this time, and on an actual meaningful arc to complete his 4-set journey across the multiverse in search of Daddy Oko. He has found himself a part of the Sterling Company, hired by Rouse Eric himself. He's like the most hireable person. He just ends up in jobs. But as soon as we get to play, I've got a job. Yeah,
he's like an intern with 10 years worth of experience, but he's still like
doesn't have anything to. Yeah.
As a little sidebar, Jay and Ellie did a little time frame of like this Omen Path arc, and I think Kellen is still sort of like 16. It's only been about a year since.
Crikey, has it? Because I heard and I thought it was longer than that. I thought it was about 2.5 years.
I think the characterization and the depictions in the cards do suggest that
accelerated
it's time frame, but actually in the epilogue, it's only 12 months.
Yeah. I guess there's this thing to say about how does all time pass at the same time throughout the multiverse? Are there certain planes where it might be moves a little bit quicker, or you might age a little bit faster or slower? Maybe. Who knows? Anyway. So yeah, he's found himself part of the Sterling Company, hired by Rouse Zarek himself, currently in charge of building a relay that can connect the multiverse electrically through the Omen Paths. He is hired as a security personnel for the Thunder Mage, Storm Mage, Weather Mage, Bolt Master, whatever we call him. And we close the scene with Kellen on the way to prosperity and likely on the way to meeting his father. Chapter 2, Jailbreak. The chapter opens to Annie coming to terms with her responsibilities. Saddlebrush is under threat as long as Akul lives, and she remains there. Oko's threat, although indirect, isn't hollow. She digs up her buried thunder rifle, mounts Fortune, her absolutely not a horse mount, and rides out to the Wildcard Saloon in Rustwood to meet Oko. She arrives at a largely abandoned town and enters the Fae's hideout. Who we find inside is a veritable hodgepodge of characters forming Oko's gang. We have Vraska, alongside Malcolm and Breeches, who is chasing around Tiny Bones. There is also is it Kakani siblings? Geezer and Giralf?
I'm pretty sure when I did the little Lore Shots episode, it was Sasani.
Okay, cool. So the Geezer and Giralf are there, and Arietti, who we last saw recruited to some task by Ashiok. We've got to assume it was, this one at the end of...
Arietti or Ariette?
Oh, did I say Arietti? Yeah. It's Ariette. It's definitely Ariette. So she was clearly hired by Ashiok at the end of the last Wilds of Eldraine story, quite clearly for this. And he is behind the heist, having hired Oko and everyone else to break into a Fomori vault with untold value or power, quote-unquote, within. The first step towards accessing the vault is to find its key, currently held within the Sterling Company headquarters, where 2 more of the team are currently being held also. more than likely as men on the inside. The gathering is interrupted by a final crew member, Rakdos, who can't even fit within the saloon. We now have all of our players and the first stage of the plan, now onto Prosperity, where the Sterling Company are situated. There is your typical espionage plot with Oko in disguise as a company courier, dropping off a package to the front door whilst Annie and Ariette approach from the back. Ariette using her charm magic to distract the guards as Annie breaks the last two crew members, Satoru Umezawa and Kervek, of all people, from their prison cell. Meanwhile, the package Oko handed over to the guards, now in place on the leader of the Sterling Company, Bertram Greywater's desk, rattles slightly as the bones within it reassemble themselves into tiny bones and open the door of the office from within. Oko and the newly arrived Satoru break open Greywater's safe, and inside they find their prize, the sixth key to the Fomori Vault. And it says sixth key. Obviously, the guys don't know it's a sixth key, but in the story it's listed as the sixth key. With his task complete, Oko leaves the building, but as he makes his way to the rendezvous point, he crosses paths with Rao and his newly appointed guard, Kellen. Kellen's fey magic causes Oko's disguise to slip, and Rao to recognise and confront the trickster. With Rakdos arriving, a fight ensues. In the heat of the moment, as Kellen explains his heritage to Oko, he ends up switching sides and leaving with the Outlaws, leaving Rao and his guards behind in the dust. Chapter 3, A Train to Prosperity, opens with us back at the saloon. Kellen gingerly approaching Oko and trying to build a bit of rapport with his father expressing how his son will be a good addition to the team, assuring him there is much to learn of his true heritage, and Oko will teach him. However, Oko's inner monologue gives plenty of reason for Kellen to be wary. Ashiok explains that the next part of the plan, rescuing an outcaster who has skills in artifacts from a train bound to Prosperity. Bertram Greywater has him under guard, clearly with the intentions to use him once he's recovered the key back. It's your normal train heist, but with added sibling rivalry, telepathic bickering, and of course a horde of zombies. The climax of the heist comes with Kellen almost single-handedly saving the entire train's worth of passengers as it nearly careers off of a broken bridge, courtesy of our demolitionist breaches.
Spider-Man style.
Oh, we haven't got to this real Spy-Man bit, yeah. And we see Oko and Kellen come to an impasse over their responsibility to keeping innocents from danger. In the end, though, the train is saved, Nolan, the outcaster, is recovered from the Sterling Company, and Annie and Kellen bond as the only two of the crew that seem to have any moral compass. Kellen starts to see that Oko may not have the best intentions, even for himself. Chapter 4, Finding Tarnation. It keeps auto-correcting Kellen to Kelly in my text, which I quite like, so now I'm going to call him Kelly. Kelly ruminates over having twice stolen from Bertram Greywater, his father's questionable moral compass, and his place in all of the criminal activity he's found himself. Oko tries to offer him some cursory comfort, whilst Ashiok plunders Nolan's mind for answers regarding the key and its functionality. They discover it is one of 6 keys. The other 5 are already in Akel's possession, adorning a necklace that he wears at all times. Male resides in Tarnation? Akel resides in Tarnation, which sits below the Fomori Vault, but requires a map to locate and travel to. With the information they need in hand, Kelly insists on returning Nolan to somewhere with relative safety. Oko fails to see the worth, but once again, Annie backs Kelly when no one else will, whilst Gisa and Jarov travel to Thief's Volley to recover the map to Tarnation. We cut to their return, and the infiltration of Tarnation being planned. Don't worry, again, in that side story, you do see that. I think it's deliberately set up to be like, wait, we don't get to see that? It's like, oh, no, you will. Just in its whole separate own thing. So they return. We cut back to the infiltration of Tarnation being planned. Oko, Annie, Vraska, and Kellen, as the least conspicuous of the group, are to head in to open the vault. Morg Taranau is its true name, and the rest will follow once it's open. Kellen is taken aback by Oko's request to join him, with the Fae expressing that the lad has skills that he needs. At this point, Oko's intentions with Kellen are clearly manipulation first, caring father figure far, far behind, if there at all. Once they reach Tarnation, the quartet start looking for the likely hideout of the Hellspurs and come across Twist Fandango, best name ever, inside one of the local saloons. Twist Fandango. Yeah. What a name. Kellen does exactly what you'd expect under pressure in these circumstances and crumbles, neatly blowing their cover, and the situation turns swiftly to violence. In the chaos, Twist manages to escape and gather reinforcements. Akel's inner circle, who trap the gang, clamp them in irons and lead them to their master. Once confronted with the Scorpion Dragon, God, I'm never going to get over saying that, it seems that there's no escape or negotiation this time. However, with a bit of quick thinking and heavy reliance on the pride of a dragon, Keller manages to goad the tyrant into a duel, one-on-one at midnight. Episode 5, High Moon. Welcome to the Thunderdome! Oh, close enough anyway. The chapter spends the first half covering action, which usually Cliff notes pretty succinctly. Kellen goes toe-to-toe with Ackle. It might be the fayest fight we've seen in a while, but it certainly is not the fairest.
Did you write that down?
Yeah.
You wrote that down as something to say during this overview.
I did.
Okay.
Ackle's strength is readily apparent, and despite his best efforts, Kellen can't do more than nuisance the dragon. His initial intent to wear the beast down quickly becoming obvious folly. He continues to tap into his Fey power, however, finding new strength, the ability to create weapons, and even the ability to glamour Ackle when pushed to his limits. A quick mention of Kellen's feats this story, but for now we'll put a pin in that, because by God, the boy can do anything these days. Kellen manages to bring Ackle to his knees. Hypnotised and tethered, Kellen chokes the life from him. However, Kellen cannot help his idealistic nature for a moment of doubt, killing this odious creature in cold blood, and that is all the dragon needs to snap from his lull as he pounces on the half-human, ready to finish the job. Suddenly, a bolt of lightning strikes Ackle. A little time was all Kellen needed. The Sterling Company, Raul Zarek, and all have arrived, and of course, all hell breaks loose once again. In all the fracas, Annie, Oko, and Vraska are freed by Tiny Bones. Turns out the bone necklace that Oko was adorned with wasn't part of his illusionary Hellspur costume, but the very real body of the skeletal pickpocket. That was a really cool bit. I really liked that.
I think Tiny Bones all the way throughout this was an all-star.
Right, I agree. The gang hurry to the vault whilst everyone is nicely distracted. Turns out Kellen getting them caught, the duel and preceding chaos was all part of the plan. Of course it was. But as they flee the scene, Kellen is caught in the crossfire, and in spite of his utter disbelief that Oko was possible of such a thing, he is left behind. A final blow to the head, knocking him unconscious. We follow Oko's ragtag scoundrels, as a few of which are unhappy with Oko's duplicity, Vraska disliking not being part of the plan, and Annie not being happy with abandoning Kellen at all. Oko makes the point that if they want access to the vault and to stop Ackle, it is literally now or never, whilst the raid below distracts everyone, and she reluctantly agrees to push onwards. Kellen awakes to find he is in custody of Raul Zarek, who is more than happy to welcome Kellen back if it means that whatever is inside the vault falls into the right hands rather than the wrong ones, and it can be appropriately kept safely off-plane, secure from potential misusers. Kellen takes his hand, finally ready to do what's right, even if it means against his own father. Chapter 6, best name so far. The Ballad of Thieves and Thunderslingers.
Yeah, it's cool.
Bit overworked, but I like it. Who doesn't love a good old ancient booby-trapped ruin? Or a classic laser room? The Fomori have clearly watched their fair share of spy flicks. We're inside the vault in a grand room with a door on the other side of it, magic crisscrossing the space, threatening to pour molten lava into the room if triggered. The obvious combination to get around this booby trap is the combination of Tiny Bones and an origami crane drone, which safely navigates the magical grid, disabling it. The next obstacle is the door itself, that is sealed with a magical ward. Finally, we understand why Kervik is here, his mastery of magical barriers allowing him to make steady work disabling it. Unfortunately, time is not on their side, as a voice from across the chamber growls that they are too late. Ackle was not defeated and returns to halt their progress. Those waiting to see our demon Rack Daddy fight our scorpion dragon get exactly 2 lines to geek out over. There is one final standoff between our heist posse and the Hellspurs as Kervak finally manages to unseal the door. Vraska and Oko take first opportunity to dash through and slip away from the fighting. They approach the keyhole, a mechanism brimming with foreign magic, reminiscent of Omen Path magic, but as Oko moves to place a medallion inside, they are confronted by Kellen and Raul. Raul pleads to Vraska, who reveals the only way to fix what I've done is by getting what's inside the vault. Very telling line that at the time feels a bit overdone, and we'll understand later why. Kellen finally confronts Oko over not treating him with the respect a son should deserve, simply as another member of the gang, disposable. Oko offers Kellen a simple choice. Help me, or get out of my way. The two both move for the medallion, Kellen faster and more agile, able to claim it, but even despite Annie's help defending the kid one last time, the room fills with shadows, and Annie, Kellen and Raul fall into nightmare as Ashiok arrives to ensure the job complete. They enter the medallion into the mechanism, and the door to the vault to Morg Taranau finally opens. I'm actually going to cut and say the excerpt, because I waited the entire fucking story to hear what was inside this, and so I want to actually get the actual words. A golden mist burst into view, stretching in every direction. There were no walls or ceiling to be seen, just a seemingly infinite expanse filled with metal, curved pathways leading to the centre of the room. Stairs hovered on top of one another, overlapping in a way that made them appear as if they were constantly shifting in place. At the top of the innermost platform was a pod-like structure encased in glass. Metal stretched around the glowing sphere, marked with an ancient script and surrounded by threads of amber magic. Behind it was a mural of an enormous horned creature towering over the platform like a guardian. Ashiok places a hand against this pod, and behind the glass something moves. In this moment, the illusion casts across Ashiok's hand, and then their body fades. It is actually Jace Bellerin who stands before Oko. Dun dun dun. Dun, dun, dun. Before he can begin to question him, Jace places both hands on the chamber and the glass shatters, revealing a motherfucking Digimon. No word of a lie, it's actually just a Digimon. Can't tell me different.
It's just a Digimon.
It's literally just a Digimon. Anyway, Vraska forces Oko to planeswalk away through slow petrification, and the two of them yeet out of there with the little fuzzball as the ruin begins to collapse in on itself. The gang will hop-skip it out of there on the back of Rakdos, who claims... Such a good line. Where are we? I have sworn once to never be ridden again. Let it be known this is the last and final time. I just want every single time we have Rakdos in a story that somehow he ends up getting ridden, and each time he gets increasingly...
I think that is going to be the joke moving forward, because it happens again.
Well, Tiny Bones rides him earlier, like in the story, like, and it's fine. Because
he rides him later on as well.
Does he ride him again later on?
There's a line in about a paragraph's time.
Oh really? But I think that's fine. I think that's symbiosis. That's not riding. The two of them are such a lovely little pair. Anyway, we're very nearly at the end. Kellen casually mindfucks Ackle into going back into the crumbling ruin and just staying in there. I guess he is the new he can do anything guy, because apparently he can mindfuck people. He
glamours them. He glamours.
That's the same difference as a mindfuck. I'm sorry. If you can turn around and glamour a demon scorpion dragon to go, hey, go and sit inside that crumbling ruin and just stay there forever. That's essentially what Jace did to Azor.
Yeah.
Anyway. Very, very near the end. We get our epilogue of sorts in Oko returning back to the gang and offering commiserations and being equally hoisted as the rest of them by Jason Vraska, and the opportunity of bringing the gang back together once again in the future. Kellen is helping Annie on her ranch, and despite another generous job offer from Raul Zarek, he assures the Thunder Mage that he is waiting for someone. And would you lo and behold, Amalia actually just rocks the fuck up. The ship is still sailing, boys. We got her back in the story.
Yeah, Molly's cool. I liked that little bit, but at the end, she was nice.
And then we do this whole other thing, but we'll talk about that in a little bit.
So, yeah, it's the Hateful Eight, it's the Magnificent Seven, it's Ocean's 11, but there's like 15 of them. I was trying to count off in my head. There's way too many of them.
Yeah. It's a very cliche story,
but I think it had to be because it's a very troped.
It's a trope plane entirely.
It's the trope plane.
They went, here, let's give you a plane that's completely barren, that has no previous life on it, and let's put a bunch of villains in it.
But isn't it okay? So, story aside,
yes.
We'll talk about the story and the characterization in a moment. Let us take a moment to talk about Thunder Junction. Much like Ixalan, the plane can't be called Thunder Junction, surely. I suppose it has no name because it has no inhabitants.
That's the thing. So that's the thing that makes me kind of more suspect, right? Is because they made a very specific point to avoid this idea of conquerors, settlers,
colonialization.
Like specifically, the Atlins are very clearly
Atins. It's actually it's two eyes. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Atins. The Atins are very clearly like the Native American analog, but
I think the specifically as well, because we do have to be specific with this. I think they're based on the Navajo.
Specifically, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Which is an interesting choice because they didn't obviously want to stray across history and put them as the people that are there and then have everyone
the First
coming.
Nation,
but then also it kind of then trips up because then they're also part of the people coming and settling. So does that kind of is that even more? Is that worse for representation?
It's sort of saying that the First Nation coded people in Magic the Gathering are also colonists.
Yeah.
And you're like,
that doesn't really work. And I guess the way
two people who come from a nation of colonializationalists.
Colonizers.
That's like, a fisherman spots another fisherman, and that's not cool.
No. And I guess, because the thing that they argument is, right, is that the only thing we can kind of see is there are these, sentient cactus folk, but then the argument is that they only really became sentient when other sentient races came to the plane. And then there's this whole kind of, it doesn't feel like it's only been a year and a half of people coming here.
No.
It feels like it's been about half a decade.
Yeah.
And the argument against that is that people say that, well, if you ever go to these random towns out in the sticks of America where gold mining was this big thing and these towns would just pop up and disappear overnight. It isn't actually a misrepresentation per se, but it doesn't feel like it's legit. It doesn't feel realistic.
My biggest combat to that sentiment, because they're right, because it was made all all the towns made of wood, and like if you want to go super history about it, the fucking Roman legions. I don't know why I keep talking about ancient Rome. Men will know everything about ancient Rome rather than going to therapy.
Wait, isn't this a meme that people talk about? Right?
Yeah. But like throughout history, like armies have like built settlements during battles, and do you know what I mean? So it's not like a mad idea that settlements can pop up and come down, especially if they're made of wood, which they were in the western frontier. My problem with it all is that for a plane that had no identity, has only been around for a year or two, and is made up exclusively of denizens from across the multiverse, they all decided on the same aesthetic.
Yep.
They all went, oh yeah, these wide-brimmed hats. They have no concept of cowboys, so they went, yeah, wide-brimmed hats, balaclavas, leather, and trains and horses.
It's taking the who decided that detectives wear fedoras on Ravnica to like the nth degree.
Yeah.
And I agree. Like it's one of those things of like they set the aesthetic, but then they couldn't justify it. Like, and people do say again, it's also there's magic involved here. So of course, like there will be certain things like the locomotives are crazy.
Well, apparently they're built by the Riveteers, even though they look like they're from Kaladesh.
They absolutely look like. But I guess that's the idea, right? Is that the designs come from one plane, but the workforce comes from the other.
I mean, Gonti's on the plane for sure.
So I mean, there's also something to be said. We'll talk about that when we get to the flavour picks, because I've got a big bugbear about like the opportunity that they had here was huge, and I feel like they barely scratched the surface, and then just went, "That'll do," because it's also like the first time we've had a proper desert plane.
Yeah.
And I've just thought of this. Where the fuck is Angrath?
Yeah, I've been saying this kind of out like.
Because I've only just realised that, of course, he wasn't in the
really?
set. Yeah,
I swear I've spoken about this with you.
And he was a pirate, right? And he's a perfect kind of. I guess he's not. He wouldn't be an outlaw.
But no,
right?
but he was the plant that everyone went, oh, so there's a cowboy plane because he's a cowboy.
Do you know what happened? Is that what they realised was that, well, he can't come from that plane because that plane didn't have any denizens on it a year and a half ago.
Yeah.
And they realised, oh, fuck, we fucked it. I guess we're going to have to wait until we get to our next desert plane.
The thing is that Angrath, although I think they coded Angrath as being... He had kids and he had like a story, but he was still like literally an anger mage who used to like fuck shit up as a pirate.
Flaming chains.
He wasn't really a good guy.
No.
He just had a past.
I guess you could argue that he was... back on his home plane, just a blacksmith, right?
He was a tragic anti-hero.
Yeah, so you could just say he was a blacksmith and he spent the last, God knows how long he was trapped in the plane, getting angry and angry because he can't get back to his kids and he's surrounded by all these pirates. And if you're surrounded by pirates fighting vampires, you might go a little bit angry, you know? It's fair enough. Maybe
his name was Angrath.
But you know what I mean? Like, but maybe his black, the black part of his colour pie came from him being on Ixalan. Once he went back home and settled back down, he'd go back to being just a mono-red artificer. Because I can imagine him being a blacksmith. Anyway, we are not talking about Thunder Junction.
We're literally not talking about Angrath because
No,
he's not here. I mean, so the only structure that was... Because we'll see in the epilogue as well, it's like, which we'll get to as the epilogue to this episode, there is one structure of Mag Toranu, which is on Thunder Junction. And I was just looking through like various wikis and stuff, and Mag and Toranu are the Irish and Welsh names for plains and thunder.
Oh.
And what else has Celtic coded origins?
The Fomori.
Yeah, sure. So they really have made it make sense.
So maybe Thunder Junction didn't come. Maybe it's like a name that's like whispered on the wind.
Oh no! Well, all of the names are Omenport, fucking Stillwater. These are all the names. This is so. I think I said to you before we started recording. I actually have warmed to the idea of Thunder Junction and this story specifically. I think there is nicer things going on broadly that, if you don't look too hard at the why the fuck have they turned this into Fortnite Commander, actually work quite well. The fact that all the names Omen Port is like the people got there and went, well, this is the port for Omen Park. It's fine, Omen Port.
Prosperity makes sense.
Yeah.
That's where you're going to make your fortune.
Like Thieves' Folly being like the mass graveyard for all the thieves. That all works really well. And also, as much as I really despise the direction of we're going to have all the villains be on this plane and it's going to be like basically like Mario Kart Commander but in story form, the idea that a vault built by a multiverse traversing future race or like futuristic race can only be cracked by a team made up of people from across the multiverse makes sense. My argument is, I don't think that's what the like content creating story team thought of when they made it. I think they've backdoored into this.
They absolutely backdoored into it. I think
I'm being cynical.
If you throw enough spaghetti at the wall, eventually you've got a meal. Does that analogy
I know what you're saying.
You know what I mean? Like, I feel like they did so many things that they left nothing's open-ended. They can go, which one of our random open-ended threads makes the most sense to tie into this?
I just don't think any of the... So to kind of bring it back then into the minutiae of it, and these stories specifically, the stories are fine, the pacing's okay, Oko's doing Oko things. There's actually not a lot in this story which I have massive bugbears of. A lot of the things that I've written notes about is the minutiae of it, and this is why I think Thunder Junction, as a set and as a story, doesn't hold up, because they're not taking all the threads seriously. And I'm sorry, I am serious about Magic the Gathering. As much as I like silliness, Tiny Bones was fucking ridiculous, but they took his powers and his character seriously. Umezawa is there, the latest iteration, and we've got Karavek, two characters that have like really specific things about what they do. In the end, I've just reread Karavek's backstory of who he is. He's there because the thing's got a magical ward. All right, he broke away from the Amber prison.
Yeah, and he still got stuck in another.
Really?
He got stuck. We find him stuck in another prison.
He's just a sorcerer.
Yeah.
Umezawa's there, so he's a ninja crime boss from a futuristic a manga plane. What does he end up doing? He does some ninja fighting.
He picks some locks
and picks a lock with an origami crane or whatever, or a dragonfly. Shit that anyone else on that plane
Nashi was literally... Like, I look at it and go, Nashi was literally already on plane, why didn't you just use Nashi? And I guess you could argue, well, Nashi's not a villain. It's like, yeah, but it takes me out of the story more that you managed to get Satoru Umezawa. Again, like, all of these people, like Olivia and all these people being on the plane, like, why is the head of the crime syndicate, or why is the head person of this the person that's here? Surely you'd send your lieutenant. You'd send, go to Thunder Junction, I trust you, you're my best pickpocketer, I need to stay here and run my fucking crime business.
I just feel like this, as much as they wanted recognisable characters to kind of be this is what this plane brings to the table in this heist, it really undermines their characterization as the big bads of their own stories to be on a job for like treasure, quote unquote, that they don't even know what's going on, just because they recognize that another bad motherfucker in the guise of what they think is Ashiok is telling them to do it, and you're like, what? But
where's the for me the hierarchy gets really weirded out, because I'm like, Oko doesn't seem like the kind of guy that would turn around to everyone and go, hey guys, let's just listen to this guy. So it's like the fact he gets like the wool pulled over his eyes by Ashiok kind of feels a little bit like deserved. I'm like, but in the story, I wouldn't expect you to. I expected Oko to try and trick Ashiok, not be tricked by Ashiok.
Yeah, just like totally goes on with it. There's one line which I feel justifies one of the characters, which is Karavek a little bit, where he talks about, I can't remember, I do have the right line written down, but I have to keep scrolling through some stuff. It's where they talk about they just want to smash and grab this power, they might want to collect it for themselves, and he's got a bit of hesitance, and he talks about the idea that he's tried to tangle with powers before that he doesn't understand, and he doesn't want to do that again. He wants to take it slower, get into the vault, and then study what's going on. Whereas a lot of the other villains, because they're nuts, are like, oh, they're crazy kooky villains.
Yeah,
they
smash and grab.
Yeah, and it's like, that feels more like someone playing the longer game. Like, trust the dude from Dominaria to be like, the rest of your planes like existed for like, what, 5 days? Mine's been like around.
I've been through some shit.
I've been through some shit. Yeah. You guys need to chill out.
It does I know what you mean. It does dilute everyone down. And it's kind of like when you face a big bad in a game and then 2 games later they're a playable character and you're like, what the fuck happened to all of your abilities?
Yeah.
Like, why are you just the same as everyone else now?
Yeah.
And it kind of, again, it's one of those, there was, what lacked for me was there were certain exchanges that really played well, and then there were certain exchanges that I just felt forced. It felt like a misrepresentation of the character, and again, it felt like a betrayal of the character to have this wishy-washy kind of like bickering almost, being like, well, my magic's better than your magic, and Kervek turns around to Sora and goes, you rely too much on trinkets, let me show you what real magic looks like. I'm like, that line doesn't sound bad per se, but it's also, you're either shitting on one person I respect or you're shitting on the other person I respect. So I don't get to win from this exchange. There's no, both people come out of the conversation with me respecting both more.
Yeah.
You know, like one of the most interesting characters, and no offense to her, because I think Annie Flash is a really cool character, it's like, but you're giving me a new character and giving them loads of face time, giving Kellen loads of face time. Oko, fair enough, but we already got a full story with Oko anyway.
Yeah, like a novella. Yeah.
But there's this whole other cast that just like Rakdos barely gets
Yeah.
Rakdos
What's
might as well not be
do?
there.
He fights a cool, that's it.
But he doesn't even fight a cool, like, as in he's the only one who would be able to, because we've seen Kennen fight a cool one-on-one and arguably do better.
Yeah.
We've seen all of the fucking Hellspurs attack him as well, like, and then suddenly he comes back, and again, it's literally 2 lines of where Rakdos punches him and then goes, "This is real fun," and then they stand off, everyone's avoiding them. That's it, you never hear anything more from it.
Yeah.
Like, you could have had this really cool fucking fight between a demon and
a dragon
scorpion dragon, but instead you wasted half a chapter on Kellen fighting him, which, again, it's more grounded, it makes more sense, I understand why the story focuses on it. But if you're coming into the story hoping that finally you're going to get your big bad demon daddy to... It's like, again, he might as well not have been there, because Kellen already fought him once already.
Yeah.
And once your characters aren't actually serving a narrative function, they're just there to pad out, and it does feel like you're padding out.
Yeah.
Like, I thought the group was big enough when you got to the saloon and you went, "Oh, here's Geezer and Giraffe," and I'm like, "Oh, okay, that's quite cool." And then there's also Ariat, and I'm like, "Oh, that makes sense," because then when you hear from Ashiok, you're like, "Oh, because Ashiok kind of..." And you're like, okay, charm magic makes sense. But charm magic versus Curvix magic, is there much of a difference?
Well, and also, again, she doesn't... She had this whole thing, like, where she had this master plan on Eldraine with, like, her sisters. She has this whole world, and I just... Maybe this is just asking for too much, but I think when you do all these big sort of, like, crossover narrative things, they've done very much... This is, like, their another swing of, let's do, like, a Marvel Assemble movie, which they did with things like the Gatewatch, and there's all those jokes. But I just don't know whether... it reduces everything that they've done so like it feels like they don't matter, or maybe we're just being a bit spoiled because we do live in a world where like all of our narratives are very much multiverse based. Do you know what I mean? Like, we have a Hulk film, we have a Captain America film, we have an Iron Man film, and now we get to see them fight together. We're so used to that maybe we just kind of go, "Oh yeah, but it just reduces their characters a bit too far down," you know. I don't know. I mean, there was arguments that's happened though, right? In some of the crossovers, people have said that it gets to a point of where you start to like lose the individuality, because again, like you lose the colours for the canvas, right? Of where you've got so much you're trying to put on there, you will just miss certain things. I think there was way too many of them. Why was there like 12, 13 of them?
I know. Well, because again, Ocean's 11.
But the
Geezer and Giraffe kind of rubbed me, because I get that they wanted Giraffe because they needed a medic, because apparently what they went down the line and went, well, we need the code breaker, we need the medic, we need the sharpshooter. It was very Suicide Squad, kind of like, you need to tick off all the boxes. I'm like, but some of these boxes didn't need ticking. Yeah. Like, I think Ariat is probably, as much as she's mostly charm magic, she probably also knows how to do curative magic. Yeah, you know, you could have had her be
she's a literal witch.
You could have had her be a little bit like, what's Vraska bringing to the table apart from needing to be there because she's like one of the linchpins of the story? All she does is petrify people a little bit, so she's killing people. But you've also got Satoru, who's a killing machine. You've got Rakdos, who's a killing machine. Oko Klee doesn't need any help killing people. Like, none of these people, like, Geezer is literally there because, oh, well, she wouldn't let Giraffe go on like on something by himself. Like, so she's literally just tagging along. Yeah. And I liked having her in the story, even if it was like, every fifth line would be Geezer doing something crazy, because that's what Geezer does. Yeah. Like, it felt the narrative import was lackluster. And again, they could have had half the cast and it been just as weighty, because again, a lot of the narrative we get is carried by Annie, Kellen, and Oko. Which,
funnily enough, feels like the kind of story we would have gotten the pre-Omen path. And I'm going to say this now, much like I've actually warmed to the larger concepts of Thunder Junction, I am actually warming a lot to the larger concepts of the Omen paths, more so the groundwork that the Epilogue does than this. Yeah. Because I like the... I think I like the direction that the multiverse could go in becoming this new thing. So I don't mind the idea that, you know, people come and sort of, you know, you'll have different characters interacting, but I just think you're going too big too fast. Pre-Omen path, you would get the Planeswalker singular or pair, or maybe like you'd get the Planeswalker who's your main character. You'd get there, and I'm sorry for using this word in the context of the Western Americas, for the American West. The native like character, the one who's like from the plane that you're going to. You would get the existential threat that could be maybe it's Bolos or like another sort of like homegrown threat, and you'd get another maybe guest star Planeswalker. So you're talking like 4 or 5 characters, which we all kind of go, cool, they're here because of this, and that person's new, and bloody bloody blah. And they'd get all of this time together and all of this breathing room. And that is Oko, Kellen, Annie Flash, Cool, and maybe Jason Vraska doing some bit like stuff in the background. Right?
Or even Ral and Bertram, like you get a little bit of like the politic in the background. Yeah.
Everything else was just like mad. It was just like
because I didn't feel like Ral was. I felt like Ral was a welcome addition.
Well, he's just doing his own thing,
and it makes sense because it goes right. So why you've got this random heist going on? By the way, I'm trying to create a relay across all of the overpass.
That kind of overarching story. Yeah,
that makes sense because you see this. It reminds me of like when you get your side quest, and the side quest is actually like way more interesting than the main quest because you're like, oh, that gives me an explanation information as to what's going on in the town. And again, when you cut to because there is always a lot of questions of like, well, but why? Why is this person here and what are they doing? And Rouse actually is way more justified than...
Well, because we see in the epilogue to Murders at Karlov Manor...
True, yeah, again with him talking.
Niv Mizzet and Proft are having their kind of thing going, I know what you're doing. You want to, like, make Ravnica the centre of the multiverse. And then, boom, next story, not the driving plot line, but we see the fruits of that, where Raoul's still working with Niv Mizzet, because Niv Mizzet is he is the living guild pack now, is doing that. And then, cool, it doesn't impact the story other than to get Kellen there, because Kellen was on Ravnica. Like, it's, But
he's also aware of the vault. That's the thing, he's not ignoring the main plot. He's going, actually, no, this main plot thing is actually quite important. Let me put a pin in that other thing that I was doing completely separately, and let me get a little bit involved later. And it's also nice, because right at the end, you get Vraska versus Rao, and Rao being like, but Vraska, you were my friend. And then she goes, yes, but I was also your enemy.
There is a lot of Ravnican guild leaders knocking around, isn't there, on this
But that makes sense, because, again, if they want to make Ravnica the centre of the multiverse, the Guildmasters are able to be more flexible. Rakdos is still not justified as to why he left. Or how he managed to get through an Omen path.
How big is he meant to be as well?
So, this is actually okay, because in the original Dissension story, he can change his size based on needs.
Because in all of his card arts, he looks like he's a giant.
And then there's one when he's inside and he's barely a head taller than Vraska.
Yeah, and then there's also... Like, I'm talking, like, historically, his card arts always make him seem like he's this literal, like 10, 12-foot monster.
Yeah, he should be a building-sized demon.
Yeah, and then during War of the Spark, Gideon does ride him, and the playmat sort of suggests... Well, no, because the playmat is like... I don't know.
Because he's like, Gideon's about the size of his head, right? Like, he's a big demon.
In the one where you actually see him riding it, and then there's another one where it's Gideon descends from Rakdos, and Rakdos is like this shadow in the background, which is what they did that year. The reason I call it playmat is because that's the London Fest for 2019. That was the special playmat they did for it. This is going real fucking niche here. But I don't know, man. It just sort of seems like, again...
It feels like a misstep, but they can justify going, oh, but it was in the story. It's like, yeah, but you never mention it in the story. And there's even a point where the first time you come across him, he can't enter the saloon because he's too big.
He's like, we'll just make himself smaller then.
But then in one of the pictures, he's in the saloon. So can he or can't he?
This is a real, is the Ozolith blue or orange moment.
Right, exactly. And I guess there's always going to be these kinds of moments, and again, they can yada yada magic it or whatever, but it does also reduce the import of the muscle if the muscle can just go, oh, I can be really small or really big, Anyway, I think all of the casts were fine enough that I didn't get too annoyed about it. I feel like Kellen actually got an arc that I can kind of get behind.
I really don't mind Kellen. I still can't decide whether I find it endearing or slightly annoying that he had so many moments of, oh, Oko's actually a bit of a shithead. But I still want his approval. But then this is his whole thing. He wanted to find his dad.
He spent so long looking for him that now he's got him in front of him, and also it wasn't like it was planned and there's a lead up. It was literally out of nowhere. I've randomly caught him in the middle of a heist. I'm sure he's doing it for the right reasons. Kellen can't help but be the sunshine. It will be sunshiny tomorrow kind of guy.
I do think that they have done a very good job with him. Like, throughout his adventures on Ravnica or, Thunder Junction or even back in Eldraine, where he has this bright-eyed, giving people the benefit of the doubt, but he still has learned that, like, when enough is enough sort of thing. So it isn't just endless optimism, endless, like, life is fluffy. It's he is refusing to succumb to the darkness, but he is starting to understand that he doesn't necessarily have to put up with shit. I actually think he's a very healthy character, and as much as I... classically, like, I'm not a big Spielberg fan. I don't really love teen dramas or, like, I'm a child. It's like, yeah, but I'm not. I'm beyond this shit. In my media, right? I really think Kellen is the character that I think they always try to make with, like, they've had Teo or Rat or these other kind of, like, wow, the multiverse. He is actually the one which I think has some legs to be a continuous character moving forward.
Yeah, well, they gave him an actual well-grounded first outing, and then they did the smart thing of having him in the background. He still chimes into the story a little bit. You can but his characterization is consistent, and there is little bits of development, and then we finally get the payoff here. And yeah, it's still his coming of age, the how I got my powers story, and he's still discovering his true strength. And there is a line from Oko saying, "You don't understand how strong your heritage is."
But we don't fucking understand how strong Oko is. Like,
because
we've known Oko for years now.
You're not going to give us because it seems that Oko is a lot more powerful than he gives credit to. And because obviously he's going to be like a trickster, so you're never going to see him using his full strength or whatever.
We still don't necessarily get too much closure on why Kellen's mum fell in love with him. And also her version of the story about Oko is that at one point he was sort of like the gentleman. He was, he did come and he was like a viable option for falling in love with.
When he was courting her, like, appropriately.
There's a line, I can't remember which of the stories it is. It's in the Thunder Junction stories, where it's Oko sees games everywhere and always knows how to turn them to his advantage. And so I took that being a little bit of a cynic when it comes to, how people engage in love and sex and all that kind of stuff. Where he might have seen Kellen's mother as, like, he's just testing out this kind of courtship love thing.
Yeah. Is there a way I can manipulate people through attraction and love and stuff?
And, love and relationships, which would be really dark.
Yeah.
But also not out of keeping.
I was going to say, I don't think it's out of his character. I think he doesn't... I don't think he's deliberately malicious. He just doesn't give a flying fuck.
Yeah.
And he's very self-serving. I'm surprised that his character isn't black-aligned. Because he feels very self-serving. To the point of where I could have sworn that his more expensive Planeswalker card was Sultai, but it's not.
No.
It just looks like it in the artwork. And I still stand by. I think that's something that might come up in the future. I think we'll probably get to a point of where we see Kellen come back to loggerheads with Oko. And maybe Oko at this point is in a much more evil position, shall we say. I say evil, obviously, quote unquote, whatever.
I was going to suggest that maybe it's because he's not, like, black can also be quite violent and brutal, whereas Oko does seem to be more of like a cerebral trickster. But then he does straight up kill people.
Yeah, he just wraps vines around people and slams them into the ground.
Yeah.
And he is obviously, he's like, knives. Ching, ching, ching.
Yeah.
I don't know. We'll see. I guess we'll see. I don't think it's the end of our arc with Oko, and it's also kind of funny that once they let Oko into the vault and then go, cool, right, you've seen enough. Petrified now, bye-bye.
Right, that's one bugbear. Vraska starts turning him into stone before he fully kryptonites. I don't know why I use that word. That's nothing to do with what I'm talking about. Before he fully solidifies, he planeswalks away because his head is still fine. And then he comes back in, like, totally fine because the plane's walking away before the spell is complete. Vraska's magic has been described as a spell before.
Yeah.
But in my mind, if I am a Gorgon and I'm solidifying you from the ground up, by the time I get to, like, your waist and you go away, your waist is staying.
Well, surely when you petrify someone, you start with the eyes, right?
Because they're looking at you?
Because they're looking at you. So what I think is maybe she was casting a different type of spell. Maybe because he's such a powerful shapeshifter anyway, the magic doesn't work the same way.
Oh, yeah, because
that's the thing. Is the thing it justifies in the story by saying that if he hadn't have shapeshifted, like almost like I guess within the shell of the petrification, he wouldn't have been able to get out.
I don't know, man. I just feel like the way I've always envisaged outside in any media is that they go boom, you're stone, like zip, and now you're solid, you're a statue.
Yeah, it just might be that it's a demonstration that Oko is, because he does even say in the story about you don't know how powerful your lineage is.
Yeah,
like maybe he is super duper strong, We just don't know, and this is all just frivolity for him. Ha 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 ha. Because for him, this was all just a game, right? Like he was only picking up the job just to get the money from Ashiok. At the end of the day, he didn't actually have a stake in it. He didn't actually care what was within it. He just wanted to get it for Ashiok. Well, sorry, Jace.
Yes. Well, I think we should move on to the epilogue, because now we're tying into there, and we'll have a lot more to say about Thunder Junction, broadly speaking, when we look at the card set next week.
I agree.
So let's talk about the epilogue whilst we still have some time.
Cool, right, well, we get two. I haven't actually written a blurb for this because, one, I ran out of time, and two, I've only recently read it anyway. But basically what we do is we get all of our loose ends. Oh, by the way, first and foremost, this is written by Alison Lurs.
She's back!
Yeah, I feel like they will never let anyone else write Jason Vraska stories than Alison Lurs.
Why would they?
Because, good God, she's phenomenal.
She's phenomenal. This is no shade to any of the writers we've had recently. They're all amazing. Alison Lurs wasn't even necessarily hired as a professional writer by Wizards of the Coast. She was just on the story world-building team, doing other things as well, which she's now doing for, I believe it's Riot Games. I could be wrong on that. But she just has nailed this style of storytelling.
She's in love with these characters and wants to write them for us, and we love her writing them for us.
Yeah,
so just
thank
continue.
you very much, Alison Lurs.
Yeah, so we get basically all the way back from, was it all that we won that he disappeared, or was it March of Machines he disappeared in? March of Machines, right at the end of March of Machines.
Yeah, because then all we won, it was the invasion after the Silex didn't.
So it was all of, right at the end of all that we won, because we never,
March of Machines is the invasion.
Yeah, we don't see him. I know we still
so
will never get this right. So yeah, the end of the all that we won story, when we have that moment where Jace turns to where Elishadorn looks to Jace, and Jace knows what he has to do already, and just goes woof. And we don't see him again ever, basically.
Yeah.
Until we see him right now, and it does fill in each of the gaps. We get a bit of text based around him with the Silex, getting run through from the Halo, and there's this whole long kind of back and forth about how he's talking about how the oil tries to seduce him, and how the Halo gives him moments of clarity, how he falls back into, and it confirms a lot of fan theories of where he has this little mind palace that he falls back into, and he falls back into it twice. Each time he comes back around, he has he sees the atrocities that he's committed. He does go to Vryn, he does lead the Phyrexian invasion, and he does succeed at first quite well. We cut to him. I think all of the army that's around him are squirming in agony, right? If he
causes seizures.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Kind of I guess in Logan, what Professor Xavier does when he's having his episodes of where he causes everyone else around him to freeze and jutter and I guess cause entire cerebral collapse or whatever. Really horrific. But he leads that as known to be the person doing that as well. The Vrynians recognize him as such, but obviously when Elish gets disintegrated by Khan and everything's rendered inert, he comes back to consciousness again and is able, just through the power of convincing his body that Phyrexian oil is a virus. So he basically gets to go into his brain and obviously rewrite the way that his body is responding and fighting the infection. It does help that he's had a heavy dose of Halo shoved through him, but he does essentially almost purge all the Phyrexianization out of him. He goes back to Ravnica, shock horror. He was the one who blipped Vraska's body after Raoul attacks her. And then there's a really touching passage of where he's trying to then also do the same thing with her, where he finds out that she's also regressed that tiny little mind palace that he put in her head during the Rivals of Ixalan. Not Rivals of Ixalan. Yeah, Rivals of Ixalan. The Rivals of Ixalan story, that little pocket mind palace that he tried to get put her in to get around Bolas to eventually betray him.
Yeah. What's the point? There was a point in one of the recent stories where someone went to a cabin and there was different characters there. Do you remember what I'm talking about?
Wasn't that the Urza Teferi?
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, when he goes back to the workshop and he's got the orb. And it's when he goes into the orb and he speaks and he ends up speaking.
Yeah, that's right. That's Teferi. Yeah, sorry.
A similar idea of where it's because a facsimile I think it might have been what's her name? The one who we said was an Elspeth in the Gix thing, Xantra. I think it might have been a facsimile of Xantra or something that talks to him.
Yes,
yeah. Right. Similar idea of where he manages to then go into her brain, her head, and convince her body this is an infection. Fight, and then God bless his heart, he goes back to Vryn, having not also to say this, he hasn't been back to Vryn since since murdering Al-Hamrat.
Yeah.
All of these years, it must be decades, I think they say it was, because he's probably about 33 now. He left there when he was 13, 14.
I think the maths is he's 29 now.
Okay.
Because 9 years ago he was 20.
Okay, so it's just shy of a couple of days. Because he says he hasn't been back to Vryn or hasn't been back to see this person in decades. Might be a little bit flowering of the language there. It might be a little bit less than that.
I think it's when he's 16 or something. Yeah.
I actually think it might be. I think he might be younger. Yeah. I think he might be even younger when he's on Vryn. Either way, he goes back and sees his mother, who he says is one of the best healers he's ever known. We then proceed to have again. I'm not going to go into all the details, but a really lovely passage of Jace and Vraska at home with Jace's mum, and Jace's mum has separated from Jace's father over. I mean, there's wars and everything happening on Vryn all the time, but the two of them are no longer together. There's hints that she's turned to alcohol. Yep. It's a very honest, truthful story.
Yes. With
very honest, truthful characterization in a very absurdist, tragic environment of where you're you've got your son coming back with a Gorgon lady. We don't even know if there are Gorgons on Vryn.
Well, no, there isn't. So there's a passage in the story where Jace almost finds it hilarious. Like, he says if he wasn't in so much pain, he'd find it ridiculous and hilarious that he's turned up with Vraska. There are no Gorgons on Vin, so at best she looks like a snake monster, and at worst she looks like a Phyrexian snake monster. So how is he going to convince this woman that he's not seen for almost 15 years to help her? And that's where he has to be. He kind of tries to gurgle through like, she's my girlfriend. Please help.
Yeah, it's like she means the world to me. Please help.
That line. So there's a line. Again, to jump in, you've hit on 2 notes I've made about the story. There's a line where his mum asks her, because she can tell that they're a couple.
Yeah. Well, the question is this your wife?
She says, is this your wife? And he has a thought.
Cute.
His thought is, he's never thought about putting it in such a small box.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't want to go too deep into my personal life. As someone who has been married and always thought that was like a very odd thing to be like, this is kind of a very narrow idea of what like relationships can be. And that actually did lead to sort of like the breakdown of my relationship with this person, was the fact that the husband-wife boxes we put ourselves into, and obviously marriage works for a lot of people. For us, I think we really, without thinking, reduced our roles to the point where it was silly. It really resonated with me, where I was like, he doesn't want to think of her as a wife because she's her own.
She's so much more
not
than that.
His wife, quote unquote. She's
Vraska,
and he replies and says that she's his world, which is a much grander thing. But also, I like in the same patches he kind of fantasizes about her wearing. We get a little backstory on Vryn where the bride wears the groom's family colours. So we know that families have sort of like colours and house colours, which is nice, the idea. They wear nuptial bracelets and they carry heirlooms on necklaces. So it's his grandmother's rings around her neck on a necklace. And just this idea that she could be his wife. And also he kind of imagines her in like an older age sort of scenario as well. So he does want her to be a wife figure, but he understands that that's almost too small of a box for her to exist in alone. And it just, the whole thing was really, I was just like, holy shit. Yeah. I was listening to Clayton Crowe, who's a content designer for Wizards of the Coast, did the voice acting for the audio stories for these 2 epilogues, which it's a bit of a mess. They've let the Magic Story podcast do the main stories, but then they've released the epilogues on their own back with internal teams. Anyway, Clayton Crowe's reading of it really did make me tear up on the way to like the train station when I was listening to this. It was quite beautiful. Anyway, so that's a whole thing.
Yeah, and I think we get that whole touching arc, but then it kind of starts to turn a little bit sour, because there is a moment of where Vraska's like, well, how do we go? Like, oh no, I think Jace's mum says it of how like you're no longer the same person that you were before. Yeah. Whoever you were before is dead. You are now new people. Everything that you did is written into your, like, I guess Jace and Vraska are known throughout the multiverse as being these people that did these things as part of the Phyrexian invasion. So now you're going to have to start a new life. You know, you have to figure out who you are now and who you want to be and what you want to do. Yeah. And it kind of, they both go a little bit nihilistic, and they both seem to go with this idea that if they can't fix the multiverse because the multiverse is too broken, so what they need to do is start the multiverse anew.
So this comes from, there's 2 ideas going on here, which I fucking love, because it brings it into micro and it brings it into macro. So the reason that Vryn is in such turmoil pre-Phyrexian invasion, because it seems like a lot of the issues on Vryn have been happening for some time, is because in Vryn, you have the 2 factions. You have the current mages, who are in charge of the mage rings, which it's already a bit of a post-apocalyptic plane anyway, but the only resource that they have are these ley lines, right, that they've built. So you have the ruling class of mages, and then you have, I can't remember the faction against them, but there are 2 factions trying to vie for power. And in between them, you've got the Arbiters, of which Alhamret was the chief one. So as much as being a bit of a shitbag, he was also keeping the plane in check in his own sphinxy way. So that when Jace killed him, the Arbiters weren't able to keep these factions from beating each other down. And since then, there's just been turf war after turf war, warlord after warlord. And so Jace has seen that he can't fix his own plane because just things, no matter what you do, things get broken. And that one of the healing techniques that his mother, who's an incredibly powerful healer, uses, she uses on Vryn sort of like what I'm going to call magical holistic therapy.
It's a phoenix feather.
It's actually like, it does actually work. She uses items imbued with certain traits to like direct healing ley lines, and one of the things is a phoenix feather, or as I kept in my mind saying phoenix down because of
it's literally phoenix down. This is Final Fantasy the set.
Yeah. Phoenix feathers allow organs to die
Yeah, and they go through necrosis.
They immediately recreate them, much like a phoenix dying. So they get this idea on both a larger and smaller scale that if they let the multiverse as it is die away, or maybe enable it to die away, a new reborn multiverse will take its place without the pain and the scars of the old one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there's a line of where he says, fix it. Oh, I need to find one. Control F for new. Is it in this one? I don't think it's in this one. I think it's in the next one. 1 second. Because it's a really telling line about kind of what they plan to be doing. Is it in this one? They agree that the most just option is the one that clears a future for all, but they mourn that the cost of that freedom will be high. Repair does not clean, restoration does not erase, but rebirth does both. So, and it feels, and the telepath and the Gorgon dream of phoenix feathers. Nothing dies, she says. It only transforms, because change is the only constant. He finishes. Their intention crackles in the coals and spreads its wings from cinders.
Yeah.
This is very much, it very clearly feels like they're going to somehow restart the multiverse.
So are we now we're in a really weird place in Magic the Gathering where usually they keep tonally something relatively consistent. Whether it's like, they might do planes which are a little bit more high concept or a little bit sillier, or characters that are a little bit sillier or more tragic, or all these kinds of things. But the overall tone seemed to be like, this is what Magic the Gathering is. Which is why I think in recent years, or the recent year, I suppose, when Hasbro's hand, whether it's true or not, the idea of Hasbro guiding narrative towards more of a marketable, packageable thing feels heavier. We have these silly detective story cowboy plane sets. And then on the other hand, we've got this really subtle idea of, are we going to have these two beloved characters who are anti-heroes and heroes at different times become this sort of Thanos-esque justified existential threat that we as the readers are either going to side with and be like, they're on a righteous mission, or be like, no, they're going to kill everyone. Like, what is this weird jerk
you add into it also that by this point we don't really know how they plan on doing it, and through a combination of a story that Tamio has read to him, and they'll come in with someone else, and something that Tezzeret had like put him onto or whatever. Like, they find out about this Fomori Vault, and that something really ultra powerful. Tezzeret
in the times where Jace was working for the Infinite Consortium and still having his memory fucked with in various ways, was sent to Thunder Junction as was.
Yeah.
And that memory was wiped. Oh, crime! There's a lot of crime in your area.
We're right by police station.
Oh, so. You just doxed yourself. I'll tell you what doxing is later, don't worry.
Thanks.
So, yeah, and then, the other one was
Tamio has
telling
a story.
him the story of the Fomori.
Yeah.
Which I like. I like the idea that they didn't...
I wish they'd tell us the story of the Fomori.
Well, what I liked about it was because you could have gone, well, that seems like out of nowhere, you just dropped this idea that, oh, no, so-and-so was on it all along. But actually, I like the idea that we dip back into parts of the story which we were there at the time, but were maybe conversations had off screen whilst we were focusing on different parts of the action.
Yeah, this is definitely something that could have happened. It could have been another tale when Emrakul put herself in the moon, and Tamio was all like, "You've no idea what you've done. This isn't the first time this has been done. This has already been happening with the Mori. I'm not being part of this," and bounces off. Also, Tamio specifically, can't be talked to again now, which is kind of it's nice that we're getting information from her that then can't be followed up on again. There's a reason why not more people can know, is because she's dead. But also she was very covetous of certain information and certain powers within the scrolls that she had, so it makes sense that she wouldn't share such information with just anybody. And it also makes sense that up until this point, there was no reason to know or to investigate this from Jace's point of view, because as far as we're aware, it went straight from that into War of the Spark, from War of the Spark into the Phyrexian arc, and there's been no other time for him to really consider or think about it.
Yeah.
It's also got to a point now of where he's probably kind of over being responsible for anyone other than, himself, Raska, and I guess by proxy the rest of the multiverse.
Yeah.
But it's also interesting that the two of them have this kind of like, because it's confirmed that the two of them obviously bang, but also they clearly don't wear protection because they have a moment of where they were speaking about trying to have a kid, and then Jason says, well, we'll have to adopt, and gives a little smile, and then Raska looks back and goes, well, I guess we'd know by now if it was going to work.
Isn't that interesting? Because when I first read that line, I took it to mean they've tried to have coitus, but their physiologies don't match up outside of like doing external things, because they're both humanoids.
Right.
But actually, you're right. When I read it now, it is more like, oh no, they do have sex. They just know that physiologically they can't produce children.
Again, it would have probably happened by now if it was going to.
Yeah.
Also, you probably don't want to mix human. I guess it doesn't really matter. We've talked about this recently on another episode about. Like, if an elf and a goblin were to have sex, would they make an elf-goblin creature?
I recently watched a video essay about orcs in Lord of the Rings and J.R.R. Tolkien's writing, and about how they could be variations of, like, elves and men and whatever.
The idea is that they splice, in Lord of the Rings. It's supposed to
Tolkien changed his mind, like, 5 times.
Oh, really? Okay, it's a shame.
Anyway, but there's to the story then, is that we get this idea that Vraska finds out she can't planeswalk. That was just nestled in there as well.
Heartbreaking, really heartbreaking.
So they discover the Omen Paths because a core visits Vryn, and so they're like, oh hello, there's these little Omen Paths, and then I think Alison Lewis does a lot of work to pry open this idea that what we were bemoaning about Thunder Junction in general is the fact that, and we said this in the last episode, that all these Omen Paths are suddenly well discoverable, even though they were initially like all these hidden little like cracks in the multiverse. Whereas I think what's actually happening is that the more and more they are discovered, the more and more people are starting to map them and know about
absolutely.
them, right?
Makes sense.
So Jace figures out that him and Vraska can still travel the multiverse, although be it slowly figuring out which Omen Paths go where. They assemble this team because they remember this from Fomori Vault. Jace remembers what he sensed inside the vault when he visited as a child. He understands, and kind of thinks this little Digimon child that he knows is in there will be the key to them being able to open up the multiverse more. They go and recruit like all the different people that we see, Breaches, Malcolm. We figure out that on Ravnica it was Jace who was the hooded figure who was in Proft's mind, which I'm annoyed about that it was so obvious, even though you saw it and I was like, but it could be anyone. You're like, no, it's definitely Jace. So,
I also think it's cute in that moment of where the easiest way, because Proft is also proficient in mind magic, the only easiest way to get him unconscious was just to clock him over the head with a pipe.
There's the line there where it's Vraska would have been proud of his violence. I was like, oh, that's such a great line.
Yeah. At all times he's always thinking, oh, my boo.
Yeah. Like, how can I trick this person? Oh, wait. Knock.
Yes.
Bang. That's the
he's lucky
way.
that he didn't kill him, because he's not used to having to hit people with
That's
pipes.
the kind of silliness that I do like in Magic the Gathering, right? Anyway, we see them recruit the team. We discover, obviously, the thing that we kind of knew anyway, which was that by this point, because we saw it happen in the Thunder Junction story, that Ariette was contracted by Ashiok, quote-unquote, that turned out to be Jace. It was Ashiok during 90% of that story.
But the epilogue was clearly not.
Was Jace, right? So fair enough, it all starts tying together. They get this team to Thunder Junction to crack the Fomori Vault to get the kid.
Which also makes sense why at certain points in the story it also mentioned Vraska and Ashiok talking, amongst themselves in the corner of the room.
Yeah.
And it also justifies a bunch of little lines, like Ashiok turning around to Kellen saying, I have no wish to harm him. When we're talking about Nolan,
a very un-Ashiok thing to say,
which wouldn't happen. And then there's also later on when Vraska was saying about how I need this, like it's how important it is, and when Oko's kind of taken aback, thinking, well, why? Like it doesn't look like you want this paycheck. You need this paycheck, and it does. It touches on it, and you don't know why, but the reason being that her and Jace are in cahoots to this larger arc rather than just plundering it for treasure.
Which does make me think that actually, although the writers are clearly good at what they do, there is a slightly firmer hand on the story than maybe the silly hats in the past 2 sets have led me to believe. They are caring about it. I think it's just, unfortunately, it just seems like they're also slapping hats on people. And ultimately, we get this Fomori child.
Well, we don't know for sure that the child is of Fomori descent. We just know that the Fomori have captured and imprisoned it, right? This
is true. I was thinking about this as I was reading it. And as I saw, because I saw the artworks for Loot coming out before I saw the story, because I'm very slow to it.
Can we just pause for a moment of the name Loot, the key to everything?
Yeah.
Might be the most angrifying thing in this set for me.
They even make, Alison Lurs even makes fun of it in the story.
It's such a stupid
Because Vraska
name.
says, like his friends, I can't remember what she says, like plunder and bounty.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, no, sorry, Loot.
It gets to a point of where it's almost like the writer goes, I can't believe you're making me write this, so I'm going to make fun of you for it.
I think a lot of the Magic writers feel that way sometimes.
Yeah, fair.
Looking at the design for Loot, and by the way, I am firmly in the camp of I do not find Loot cute. I'm sorry.
I think that the art by Gabaleps, which also interesting name, cool, fantastic.
They've done quite a lot of artwork for Magic, actually.
That's a good artwork, even if Jace's face looks a little bit goofy. Digimon artwork, not so much a fan of.
So, Loot has a little light in their tail.
Yes.
They look more like a sort of foxy, feline-y thing, as opposed to a goat, which the Fomori were clearly... Even though their typing is Giant Warrior off of Ruhan and Fomori Nomad, they are clearly goat... I'm going to say this, goat-coded, to use the parlance of children.
True.
However, when I looked at them side by side, I was like, well, Lute's got the small horns. The Fomori noses are flat, as is Lute's against the face. It could be that they grow into these things.
True.
He does have the sort of paint markings.
And we never see Fomori tails, right? And also this could be a very special genetically modified Fomori, you know?
So when Jace goes into Lute's mind, he sees basically a map of the multiverse in real time. Which means that
with
he
the
can
omen
track,
paths
which
as
he can
well.
track the omen paths, which is obviously... So this brings me back all the way to the beginning of this podcast episode, where I said I kind of like the larger things that they're doing with the omen paths, because now, in my mind, if I was to be hired as a writer for Wizards of the Coast, I would start going, okay, so there are certain planes which they're not very interesting, but they're now a highway between different planes that are interesting. So, like, you know, middle of nowhere plane is the kind of junction between Ravnica and Dominaria. So that means that plane is now going to start becoming populated, or like they're going to start becoming like marketplaces of like different planes and all this kind of stuff. So I like the fact they're going to be making this more integrated, and it could evolve in a nice way. My problem is with the characterization of Vraska and Jace's parents of Lute, which is kind of where they're going with this.
Yeah.
She saves it at the end when Jace calls his family his beloved and his ward, because a ward isn't necessarily their child, it's more like a child in your care. My big problem is, if I was the character of Lute, and although Lute is clearly sentient, it's still very, like, it's a child's mind, right?
Yeah, it's an infant.
As Lute gets older, if I was being a cynic, and this storyline is very cynical and very nihilistic in their world outview, it's designed to be, if I knew that my adopted parents only really adopted me because they understood that I was a powerful being who maybe had a key to the multiverse, wouldn't I feel like their love wasn't justified at all? It's not unconditional love.
It could very easily go the way of like, wait, you only wanted me because I'm a weapon.
Yeah.
And then that then in turn triggers him to then become a worse weapon. And again, is it better for him to exist outside of suspended animation? Like, does now he actually gets to live a life where otherwise he wouldn't have otherwise?
Why did the Fomori
put him in
a prison?
Exactly. Well, I guess the Fomori probably never expected not to come back. We also see the other big thing as well, that between Lute not looking like a Fomori is that he doesn't look like the Fomori that we've seen, but Fomori Nomad and Ruhan might be from like
ancient Fomori,
ancient or deep descendants, you know?
Oh shit, yeah.
Either or.
Like Turi Island, as we see on the Planeshace card, is like a post-apocalyptic coin empire in ruin.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh.
So we don't actually know what... We've only seen a little bit of what the Fomori in the chamber that Quintorius finds looks like, you know? So we know that there's actively now an alive Fomori somewhere on Ixalan. We know that there is a captured Fomori, a Fomorian captive that is now around the multiverse. So I imagine that at some point that arc is going to then, those two things are going to join. You know, that Fomori might go to the vault and go, well, who the fuck opened this up?
Yeah.
And also, they don't even know what the fuck they're handling.
Yeah.
It could be that Luke goes from being this lovely, because they very deliberately make him out to be this cute little fucking fuzzball thing. And if anything, you're wary for Luke. You're not wary for the cast being like, oh, you've let this horrible monster out. You're like, oh, this little cute thing's been let out by a couple of fucking mentalists that are using their love to justify... Also, using love to justify destruction is like one of the most dangerous things in the fucking world, because not very much can get in the way of it or rationalise it.
Yeah.
So, worrying.
I was really, really wary of when I was seeing... And again, this is the classic don't judge a book by its cover thing. When I saw the cards and the storyline coming out on the cards and on Twitter and stuff about Vraska and Jace and their little fuzzball baby... Before I got to the epilogue myself to read the story, I was like, oh, that's it. Magic's fucked. I'm out. See you later, guys. I'm playing Pokemon TCG these days anyway. Right? Which is true.
It's true.
But actually having read the stories, I just have to park the little cutesy fuzzball memification of magic in my mind, because that is still a worry. The memification of magic is the phrase that I'm going to keep leaning on.
It quite literally is.
Don't love it. However, if I just take that as, look, this is happening now, what they're actually doing with it, they're going to really, really dark places with this, and I fucking love it. I really love it.
The ending line where Jace is talking about the blind turn season, the miserable multiverse, he says, the last line is, ours will be better.
Oh
That's
my
so
God.
ominous
Dude.
from someone we've just been reminded of how unbelievably powerful Jace actually is.
You've literally killed 3 maniacal multiversal despots. Can you please not?
One of them as a child, like it's like I get if of all the people to look after this ridiculously powerful infant, Jace is probably ironically quite well trained considering he was also a prodigal fucking mentalist.
Yeah.
And I think not to reduce Vraska's like power or whatever, but Jace is a big like almost like Nexus level being, right? Within Magic Story, and if he does let loose completely, which is again this is another moment we didn't talk about, but there's a moment of had Elish properly understood what she had with Jace, the multiverse would have crumbled instantly.
She could have put him in the World Tree, and
but
boom,
somehow he managed to. And I guess again, whoever when he got stabbed with the halo, that was literally the MacGuffin. We were like, well, that didn't even come to anything. That's the only thing that stopped him from falling. So
I will eat my words.
It.
I will eat my words about Halo. It really did become the thing, even though at the time it wasn't clear. And maybe that's just good storytelling, and I can shut the fuck up.
Maybe we were too impatient. And again, there's so many drops. Like we always go, oh, well, they're never going to pick that up again when it comes to things like, say, Emrakul in the Moon. And I guess maybe this is an example of how they go, well, we already kind of had a plan for this in the near immediate future, but don't worry about our long-term drop plans because there are things that we will come back to. Mm-hmm. We will make it worth it. We will deliver.
Doesn't the in the Thunder Junction story, doesn't Mug Taranu the vault lift out of the mountain which has been surrounding it?
I think it's even considered to be potentially suspended.
Yeah, it was suspended because it had the mountain around it, and in Tarnation, which was the town that was built below it by the
Hellspurs.
I was going to say the Fire Breathers. Whatever that faction was. But didn't it crumble away, and then there was just the sphere, the vault sphere that was there?
I know that the ruin around the vault collapsed down onto Tarnation.
Because now is there a Fomori spaceship?
I think there might just be there by itself, unadulterated by everything around it. Yeah.
Because now that's another thing.
But also, it says obviously in Big we see in the cards there's a bunch of different weapons, and it's mostly weapons, things that create armies, lots of token makers, lots of construct producers. We don't see any of that in the story.
You're talking about the big scorecards.
The big scorecards. Yeah. So that kind of gives a hint as to, because originally Jace was going to be in the big score as well. Grand Abolisher was not going to be, and they got swapped over.
Oh really?
Grand Abolisher was originally going to be in the main set, and then they swapped it over. I don't know why it made a difference to swap them over, because
maybe it keeps the Thunder Junction story within the same set.
I suppose, yeah. But I guess if they weren't going to do it originally, did it really matter? Whatever. I mean, but most of the cards from the big are artifacts, and they do seem to be like weapons of some kind of variety. So maybe there's more to the vault than just this little random dude. Because that's one thing that Oko says when he goes in. He's like, "Well, I was expecting loads of treasure and stuff, and there's just this one orb," So I don't know. We'll see. I think it's setting the plot point up. I think someone's going to go there expecting to find loot and be like, "Where the fuck? Who has taken my giant space MacGuffin?" Because he's really fucking important to everything not ending.
Yeah,
I get creepy. The Omen Pass are going to actually secretly destroy the multiverse vibes.
Well,
Destabilization is what it feels like.
Well, part of the reason that Alison knows is such a good writer. The reason that I think a lot of people are going to side with Vraska and Jace, either in the story or as fans of the story, is that their assertion, which was our worry as well, looking at the Omen Paths as engagers of this media, is that they go, the threats across the multiverse are vast and infinite and dangerous.
And now they have
access to everything. Yeah. So what the fuck's going to happen? Which was when we saw
Omen Paths. Are there Omen Paths to the meditation realm now? Is Bolas free?
Exactly.
What if an Omen Path accidentally booped itself into the middle of the moon on an Innistrad? Can Emrakul then get free? Yeah.
So all those things where when they brought Omen Paths, we were like, well, that's dumb, because that just means that this tiny little gold meadow is now going to be subjected to all this shit.
And slivers.
Yeah, exactly.
We haven't even considered slivers can now just travel the multiverse.
So their justification is a justification.
Yeah, it does make sense. Yeah, if this is the multiverse breaking and you can't fix, the only way for people not to suffer is to restart. And it's a very bold narrative choice. It happens across multiple different stories. And we don't know yet where they're going to fall on either side. I think most people are assuming that before it comes to that climax, Jace and Vraska will realise that it's a bad idea, but then someone else would have piggybacked their idea and then try and carry it to its natural conclusion.
I hope they don't do that. I really hope they have it that the next big bads are people that we know and have known for many years.
And we have the moral quandary of going, but both sides have justification, like a civil war kind of thing, right? Some people of the multiverse will agree with them, certain won't. We'll have this big crossover.
Yeah.
Oh, another big crossover event, Andy, where we have all of these two big teams that fight against each other. Instead of having all the good guys in one set and then all the bad guys in another set, now we're going to have all the good guys and all the bad guys fight each other across a plane like the opening of X-Men. By the way, the new X-Men series.
I haven't watched any X-Men.
It's really fun. It goes hard.
Yeah.
It's really good. When we read this story and we were like, oh, actually, this is fucking great.
Yeah.
You watch X-Men, you go, oh fuck, actually, this is pretty fucking good.
I need to I've been watching The Bad Batch.
Oh yeah, good. I haven't actually watched it.
I've heard
it's pretty decent.
Now, this ties in. I know this seems like I think we've finished the episode now.
Yeah.
But this does tie into it. This idea of storytelling. When I loved the Clone Wars. They went a bit silly with it in the first few episodes because I don't think they realised that all of the fans of Star Wars were now 30 and they didn't need a little child character being like, hey, Sky Guy, with oh my god, Ahsoka.
Uh-huh.
Ahsoka is now one of the most beloved characters in all of Star Wars fandom because they've evolved it and they've realised what they needed to do.
She's come a long way since the initial Clone Wars, yeah.
Star Wars, the Clone Wars, the CGI one, as opposed to Clone Wars, which is also very good, which was the Cartoon Network animated version. They really went really dark with some storylines. They went a bit silly with other ones, and then they introduced in the last season of it, I think the re sort of visit when it got cancelled and they capped off the storylines. They did one final season of it. They brought in these characters, the Bad Batchers, Clone Force 99, who were a set of clones who each had their own special powers, but they were like different variations on the original clone idea. And they were very much
all
like
broken, but our own special way.
but they were caricatures, right? You had the big dumb one who was strong, and the smart picky one who was weak, and then blah 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 blah, right? Clearly that was a launch pad for them to do more like clone stories. And I was like, oh, well, you've really just cheapened that. Then I kept hearing about how good this fucking show was. And I was like, well, I like the animation style. I like Clone Wars. I like Tales of the Jedi and soon to Tales of the Empire, which will be wicked. Let's just fucking give it a go. And I'm watching it now, and it goes so hard into being like, oh no, the reason there are no clones is because like the Empire kills them all. And you're like, but don't they turn into stormtroopers? Yeah, initially, yeah. Yeah, how tragic is that? They get flipped around to be soldiers of the Empire and then immediately get betrayed. And you're like, what the fuck? Like,
wow.
Yeah, and
the Star Wars story is deeply tragic. The more you read into it,
yeah,
it's not just pew pew Jedi stuff.
And that's not even spoilers for the first couple of seasons of Bad Batch. That's known information in the Star Wars universe. You just don't necessarily see it.
Yeah, they don't present it.
This shows it in real detail. So I would go and watch it if I were you.
Yeah, well, so yeah, I guess I hope that this doesn't let us down. You know, again, it might just be that obviously it's really good to get Alison Lurs back to write these characters, and I hope that they continue to get her to write these characters. It does feel like they're going to be a big potential either quote unquote antagonist pairing or an actual antagonist pairing. I know that the next few sets don't necessarily touch on it immediately,
but I like that. They need to keep them in the background. Yeah.
Because they've done that again. It's an epilogue, right? This isn't even part of the main story.
Nope.
And I said this before the episode of how the reason I wanted to keep that separate and not go straight into it and then break it all down together is that as much as the epilogue is part of the Thunder Junction story, the Thunder Junction story is actually such a small part of what the epilogue covered across multiple sets and multiple arcs. I feel like they can do that again. They can put that on the back burner. They can leave that to the side. We now know. I mean, as much as people are going to be like, but we need to know more information about Luke. It's like they keep putting all of these random Fomori threads that we're probably going to get a big sweeping set where it covers a lot of those things and talks about them all at once. Let's go and watch some animals and let's go to a horror plane. You know, let's go and do some other things for a little bit. They've been setting up these own paths. We've done the Kellen arc for the last 4 sets to keep some kind of narrative through line. And now I think we've reached that nice cliffhanger, end of book. Cool, let's do some other side stories and come back to the book in a couple of years.
This is the official end of the Omen Park arc, which was to say Kellen's story.
Yes.
And this is the end of this is the first act of the next larger narrative.
Yeah, was it called the Dragon something arc or something? I can't remember.
I don't know. But yeah.
Yeah.
Ultimately, Thunder Junction's ridiculous and I don't love it. But as ever, the people who are in charge of executing it did a good job.
Yeah. The set itself we can pick apart to pieces, but the world that it lives within, the story it was telling, was actually pretty good, and it was worth telling, and it was a good part of the story.
Oh yeah, the Flavor Pix episode is going to be This set's trash.
Yeah, we're really positive in this episode. We're going to be not so positive in the next episode.
Excellent. Well,
look forward to that.
So to cut down on my editing time, I'm going to call it there.
Yeah, cool.
Go play the Pokemon TCG. The current standard meta is hilarious.
What is happening?
I'm playing a Charizard EX deck because I'm that kind of guy. I've tried with Iron Hands, but I think it's a little bit too slow.
Oh God! Oh no, we're pivoting.
My next podcast, Canto the Flavouring.
Canto the Flavouring.
I don't know. I couldn't think of a good one.
Canto the Palating. It's Pallet Town.
Oh yeah, the Pallet Town Chronicles.
Pallet the Pokening. Where can they find us, Andy?
Emails go to mtflavouring@gmail.com. Our Twitter is @mtflavouring with an OU. OU. My personal Twitter is @AndyManface. Nathan's, yours is
@the Fox in the Moon.
Please do tell your friends and Magic playing family about this podcast. We've been going for quite a few years now. Yeah. And I like where we are. But tell more people.
Yeah. Spread the love. Spread love, not lies.
Spread love, not multiversal genocides.
Spread love, live love.
Okay. Thank you so much for listening. This has been Magic the Flavouring.
We'll see you soon.